You really should know your place. This isn't the time or place for your kind of attitude.
Rich lady kicked an old woman out, then discovered her secret identity. The woman sitting in seat 1A wore a faded house dress and carried a worn canvas bag, her weathered hands folded peacefully in her lap. I was 28, draped in designer labels worth more than most people's cars, and I made the decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I leaned over her seat and said in my most condescending voice, "Excuse me, I think you're in the wrong section," never imagining that this elderly woman in clearance rack clothes owned the entire airplane I was standing in. Before we dive into one of the most controversial story, hit that like button right now, subscribe to Heartfelt Wealth Tales, and smash that bell icon. What you're about to hear has been suppressed, debated. Let's go. My name is Victoria Ashford III, and until that flight, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. Born into wealth. Third-generation banking fortune. Trust fund that generated more interest in a month than most people earned in a year. Princeton education. Manhattan penthouse. Wardrobe that required its own climate-controlled closet. Life mapped out from birth to death with no deviations, no surprises, no contact with anyone who wasn't exactly like me. I was flying to Los Angeles for a charity gala, the kind where wealthy people pay $10,000 a plate to eat mediocre food and congratulate themselves on their generosity. My assistant had booked me in first class, as always. Seat 1B, aisle, because I refused to be trapped by the window. The flight was at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, the civilized time for civilized people who didn't have to work regular jobs. I arrived at the airport in my town car, breezed through TSA pre-check with my designer luggage, and made my way to the gate with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. First-class boarding began, and I was first in line, naturally. I walked down the jet bridge with my Hermes bag, my Louboutin heels clicking purposefully, ready for the 5 hours of peace that first class provided. Then I saw her, an elderly woman, maybe 75 or 80, sitting in seat 1A, the window seat next to mine. She wore a faded floral house dress that looked like it came from a clearance rack in 1985. Her shoes were practical, worn, the kind you buy at discount stores. Her bag, a canvas tote that had seen better decades, sat at her feet. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, no professional styling, no expensive highlights. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked poor. She looked like she absolutely did not belong in first class. I stopped in the aisle, my perfectly manicured hand gripping my bag handle, and stared. Other passengers were boarding behind me, but I didn't move. This was wrong. This woman was clearly in the wrong seat. Some mistake had been made. The flight attendant, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, approached. "Ms. Ashford, can I help you to your seat?" "Yes, actually. I think there's been a mistake." I kept my voice low but firm, the tone I used with incompetent service staff. "This woman is in the first-class cabin. I believe she's looking for Coach." The elderly woman looked up at me with clear, intelligent eyes. She didn't seem offended or embarrassed, just observant, like she was studying me. "I'm in the right seat," she said quietly. Her voice was gentle, educated, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Seat 1A. I have my boarding pass." "Let me see it," I said, holding out my hand. Because obviously this woman had made a mistake, gotten confused, wandered into first class by accident. The flight attendant looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Ashford, I can assure you, I'd like to see her boarding pass," I repeated louder now. Other passengers were watching. Good. Let them see me handling this situation. Someone had to maintain standards. The elderly woman calmly reached into her worn canvas bag and pulled out a boarding pass. "First class. Seat 1A. Legitimate." I stared at it, confused and irritated. "How did you afford a first-class ticket?" The words came out before I could stop them. Rude, yes, but also the obvious question. This woman clearly couldn't afford first class. She was probably using miles, or someone had bought it for her as a gift, or some computer error had upgraded her. "I manage," she said simply, tucking the boarding pass back into her bag. "Ms. Ashford, please take your seat so other passengers can board," the flight attendant said, her smile strained now. I sat down in 1B, seething. This was unacceptable. I paid full price for first class, not miles, not upgrades, actual money. so I wouldn't have to sit next to people like this. So I could be surrounded by my own kind. People who understood the unspoken rules of wealth and class and staying in your designated space. The elderly woman settled into her seat, pulling out a book, an actual paper book, old and worn, like something from a library sale. She didn't have an iPad or a Kindle or any of the technology that people of means used. Just this ancient book that probably smelled like mildew. I pulled out my phone and texted my assistant. Find out who authorized an elderly woman in seat 1A. She clearly doesn't belong in first class. This is unacceptable. The response came quickly. All first-class seats were legitimately purchased. The passenger in 1A paid full price. I stared at the message. Full price? How? This woman looked like she shopped at thrift stores and clipped coupons. Where would she get the $4,000 for a first-class ticket to LA? Excuse me, I said, turning to her. I don't mean to be rude. But you're going to be anyway, she said mildly, not looking up from her book. I'm just curious how you can afford to fly first class. You don't seem like the typical first-class passenger. And what does a typical first-class passenger seem like? Now she did look at me, those clear eyes somehow both kind and piercing. Well, they dress appropriately. They have the right luggage. They belong here. I gestured at myself. They look like me. I see. She returned to her book. How sad for you. Excuse me. To think that clothes and luggage determine who belongs somewhere. To believe that wealth is visible and poverty is obvious. To be so young and already so blind. She turned a page calmly. Yes, very sad. My face flushed with anger and embarrassment. How dare this woman, this poorly dressed, nobody woman, speak to me like that? You know what? I'm going to speak to the gate agent. There's clearly been some mistake. Maybe you used miles fraudulently, or maybe there's some charity program I don't know about, but... Victoria. She said my name like she knew me, and I froze. Sit down. The plane is about to depart, and perhaps use this flight to practice something you've clearly never learned. What's that? Silence. And reflection. She returned to her book with finality, dismissing me like I was the help. I sat there vibrating with rage and humiliation as the plane pushed back from the gate. The flight attendant brought champagne, Dom Perignon, the good stuff, and I took a glass. The elderly woman declined, asking for water instead. Of course she did. Probably didn't know good champagne from cheap wine. Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance and been completely wrong? Sometimes our prejudices reveal more about us than the people we judge. Tell us in the comments. As we taxied to the runway, I pulled out my tablet and tried to work on emails. But I couldn't concentrate. I kept glancing at this woman beside me, trying to understand how she'd ended up here, in my space, disrupting my carefully ordered world. She read peacefully, occasionally sipping her water, completely unbothered by my presence or my obvious disdain. The plane took off, and I ordered a gin and tonic. Then another. The alcohol loosened my tongue, and my irritation found its voice again. So what do? I asked, my words slightly slurred. For work? How does someone like you afford first class? Someone like me? She repeated softly. You know what I mean. You're obviously not. I gestured vaguely at her clothes, her bag, her entire presentation. You're not wealthy. And you obviously are. She closed her book, marking her place with a worn bookmark. Tell me, Victoria Ashford III. Yes, I heard the flight attendant use your full name. What have you done to earn your wealth? I was born into it. My family. So you've done nothing. You simply had the good fortune to be born to the right parents. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. And yet you feel entitled to judge others based on their appearance. To decide who belongs and who doesn't. To treat people as less than human because they don't meet your standards of presentation. That's not what I'm doing. That's exactly what you're doing. From the moment you saw me, you decided I didn't belong. Not because I was rude or disruptive or inappropriate, but because I don't look wealthy by your narrow definition. She leaned back in her seat. You want to know what I do, Victoria? I observe. I watch. I learn who people really are when they think nobody important is watching. And what have you learned about me? I asked sarcastically. That you're deeply insecure. That you use your wealth and appearance as armor because you have no real substance underneath. That you've never been told no, never faced real consequences, never had to develop any character beyond rich and pretty. That you're exactly the kind of person who makes the world worse for everyone else. The words hit like slaps. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell this woman she had no right to speak to me like that, but the flight attendant appeared. "Ms. Ashford, is everything all right?" She glanced between us, clearly sensing tension. "Everything's fine," the elderly woman said before I could speak. Ms. Ashford was just curious about how I could afford first class. I was explaining that not all wealth is visible. Some of us prefer discretion. The flight attendant's expression shifted, just slightly, but noticeably, like she knew something I didn't. "Of course. Can I get either of you anything else?" "I'm fine, thank you," the elderly woman said. "Another gin and tonic," I said firmly. After the flight attendant left, I turned back to the woman. "You think you know me. You don't know anything about my life. I know enough. I know you've never struggled, never worried about money or housing or how to feed your children, never had to choose between medicine and food, between rent and heat. You've lived your entire life in a bubble of privilege, and you've never once questioned whether you deserve it. I do deserve it. My family worked hard. Your great-grandfather worked hard. Your grandfather coasted. Your father managed not to destroy what he inherited. And you." She looked at me with something like pity. "You do nothing but spend and judge and make the people around you feel small. That's your legacy." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. I'd never worked for anything, never earned anything, never built anything. I just existed in the world my family's money had created, taking up space and resources, and giving nothing back except my presence at charity galas where I could be photographed looking generous. "Why are you being so cruel to me?" I asked, my voice small. "Cruel?" She considered the word. "No, Victoria. I'm being honest. Cruelty is what you did to me, trying to remove me from my seat because I don't meet your aesthetic standards. Honesty is what I'm giving you now, a mirror to see yourself clearly. Most people are too intimidated by your money to tell you the truth. I'm not. Who are you?" I demanded. "You'll find out soon enough. We're landing in 2 hours." She opened her book again. "I suggest you use that time to think about the kind of person you want to be. Because the person you are right now, she's not someone worth knowing." I turned away, tears stinging my eyes, and stared out the window at clouds that looked like I felt, shapeless and drifting and ultimately meaningless. I didn't speak to the elderly woman for the rest of the flight. I sat there drinking gin and tonics until the flight attendant gently suggested I might want to slow down, and then I sat there in angry, humiliated silence. But I thought about what she'd said, really thought about it. My great-grandfather had built the family fortune, banking, investments, real estate. He'd been smart and ruthless and successful. My grandfather had maintained it, grown it, turned it into something generational. My father managed the trust, made safe investments, kept the money flowing. And me? What had I done? I'd graduated Princeton with a degree in art history that I'd never used. I'd worked briefly at a gallery before deciding it was too much effort. I sat on charity boards where my only contribution was writing checks and looking good in photographs. I dated men from the right families, wore the right clothes, said the right things at the right parties. I'd never created anything, never built anything, never helped anyone in any meaningful way. I was, as this woman had said, just taking up space. The realization sat heavy in my chest, mixing with the gin to create a nauseating cocktail of shame and self-awareness. I glanced at her, still reading peacefully, like she hadn't just destroyed my entire self-image with a few honest words. Her worn dress, her practical shoes, her canvas bag that probably cost $10 at Target. She looked poor, but she didn't act poor. She carried herself with quiet dignity, spoke with education and intelligence, seemed utterly comfortable in her own skin in a way I'd never been in mine despite all my expensive clothes and perfect makeup. "I'm sorry," I said suddenly. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise her. "For how I treated you. For trying to remove you from your seat. For judging you based on your appearance. I'm sorry." She lowered her book, studying me. "Are you sorry because you realize it was wrong? Or sorry because I called you out?" "Both, maybe. I don't know." I wiped my eyes, smearing my expensive mascara. "Nobody's ever talked to me like that before. Nobody's ever told me I'm worthless. I didn't say you were worthless. I said you've done nothing to create worth. There's a difference." Her voice was gentler now. "Victoria, you're young. You still have time to become someone meaningful. But not if you keep living the way you've been living. I don't know how else to live. This is all I know. Then learn. That's what life is. Learning, growing, becoming better than you were. Your great-grandfather didn't start wealthy. He built wealth. He created something. You can too. But I don't have his skills or his drive or you have resources he never dreamed of. Money, education, connections, time. You could do anything, Victoria. But you choose to do nothing. Why? I thought about it honestly for the first time. I guess because nothing ever felt like it mattered. Everything was always handed to me. There were no stakes, no consequences. If I failed at something, the money would catch me. So why try? Because trying is what makes us human. Failing is what teaches us. Growing is what gives life meaning. She closed her book completely now, giving me her full attention. Your wealth isn't the problem. It's your attitude about wealth. You think it makes you better than others. You think it entitles you to treat people poorly. You think it defines your worth. None of that is true. Then what is true? That every person has inherent dignity regardless of their bank account. That true wealth is measured in character, not currency. That the woman sitting next to you in a $15 dress might be more valuable to the world than you'll ever be in your $5,000 outfit. Are you, I asked, valuable to the world? She smiled mysteriously. I'd like to think so, but that's not for me to decide. It's for the people I've helped, the lives I've touched, the changes I've made to judge. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles. The flight attendant came by to collect cups and ensure seat belts were fastened. She treated the elderly woman with particular courtesy, I noticed. Almost deference. Do you fly this route often? I asked the woman. Regularly, yes. Why first class? If you're so committed to humility and discretion. Because I can afford it. I've earned it, and my knees are 78 years old and hurt in coach seats. She smiled at my surprise. Humility doesn't mean suffering unnecessarily, Victoria. It means not lording your advantages over others. Not using your comfort as a weapon against someone else's discomfort. The plane touched down smoothly. As we taxied to the gate, I gathered my things, my designer bag, my expensive tablet, my $800 sunglasses. The physical evidence of wealth that I'd worn like armor my entire life. The elderly woman gathered her canvas bag and worn book. Everything she carried probably cost less than my sunglasses. And yet she seemed more content, more at peace, more genuinely wealthy than I'd ever felt. Thank you, I said as the plane stopped at the gate. For being honest with me. For holding up that mirror. I didn't enjoy it, but I think I needed it. What will you do with what you've learned? She asked. I don't know yet. But I think I need to figure out who I want to be beyond just a wealthy woman who looks down on people. That's a good start. She stood, moving into the aisle. Perhaps we'll cross paths again, Victoria. If we do, I hope you'll be someone different than you were today. The first-class passengers began deplaning. I hung back, letting others go first, something I never did. The elderly woman walked slowly up the aisle, pausing to thank the flight attendants by name. I noticed something then. The way the crew treated her. Not just polite, that was standard, but genuinely warm. Like they knew her. Like she was important to them. The pilot emerged from the cockpit as we exited, and I saw him greet the elderly woman with obvious respect. Safe flight, Captain Chun, she said, patting his arm. Thank you, ma'am. It's always an honor when you fly with us. I stopped walking. Ma'am, it's always an honor? Captain Chun saw my confused expression and smiled. Ms. Ashford, I hope you enjoyed your flight on Westbrook Airlines. Westbrook Airlines. The name tickled something in my memory. Westbrook. Oh God. Eleanor Westbrook. Founder and CEO of Westbrook Airlines. One of the wealthiest women in America. Built her airline from nothing 40 years ago. Known for flying commercial on her own planes to quality check the customer experience. Worth an estimated $3 billion. I'd seen her photo in Forbes. In business magazines. In profiles about self-made billionaires who'd changed their industries. But those photos showed a woman in business attire, professionally styled, wearing the armor of wealth and power. The woman in the faded house dress walking ahead of me was Eleanor Westbrook. I tried to kick a billionaire out of first class on her own airline because she didn't look rich enough. The blood drained from my face. My knees went weak. I grabbed the seat back to steady myself. Ms. Ashford, are you all right? A flight attendant touched my arm, concerned. That woman, I managed. That's Eleanor Westbrook. Yes, ma'am. She flies commercial regularly to experience what her customers experience. Today she wanted to see how first-class passengers treat other passengers who don't meet their expectations of wealth. The flight attendant's expression was carefully neutral. I think it's safe to say she learned a lot. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Eleanor Westbrook had watched me try to remove her from her own airplane, had listened to me judge her, question her, treat her like she was beneath me, had calmly told me exactly what kind of person I was while I sat there insulting her. And I'd confirmed every terrible thing she thought about wealthy, entitled people like me. I stumbled off the plane on shaky legs, my designer heels clicking against the jet bridge floor. Eleanor Westbrook was ahead of me, moving slowly toward the terminal. I had to apologize. Had to explain. Had to what? What could I possibly say that would make this better? She paused at the gate entrance and turned, like she'd been waiting for me. Those clear, intelligent eyes met mine, and I saw understanding there. And challenge. Victoria, she said quietly, you have a choice now. You can go back to your life, forget this flight, tell yourself I was the problem. Or you can use this moment to become someone better. The choice is entirely yours. I want to be better, I whispered. I don't know how, but I want to try. Then start by learning names. By seeing people instead of status symbols. By asking questions instead of making assumptions. She handed me a business card, simple, elegant, just her name and email. If you're serious about changing, email me in 6 months. Tell me what you've done to become someone worth knowing. If I'm impressed, maybe we'll talk about what real wealth looks like. She walked away, blending into the crowd of travelers with her worn dress and canvas bag, looking like everyone and no one, invisible and invaluable all at once. I stood there holding her business card, tears streaming down my face, mascara ruining my perfect makeup, designer sunglasses perched uselessly on my head. For the first time in my 28 years, I felt truly seen. And I was ashamed of what had been revealed. I didn't go to the charity gala. I stood in the LAX terminal holding Eleanor Westbrook's business card, and I made a decision. I called my assistant and told her to cancel everything. The gala, the hotel, the return flight. I was staying in Los Angeles, and I needed time to think. Is everything all right, Ms. Ashford? She sounded concerned. No, but maybe it will be. I took an Uber to a modest hotel in Santa Monica. Not the Four Seasons where I usually stayed, not the Peninsula or the Beverly Hills Hotel. Just a clean, comfortable place where normal people stayed when they visited LA. The room cost $150 a night instead of $800. It was smaller, simpler, perfectly adequate. I sat on the bed and looked at myself in the mirror across from it. Who was I looking at? A 28-year-old woman in designer clothes that cost more than some people's monthly rent. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect nails. Perfect and empty and meaningless. I thought about Eleanor Westbrook in her $15 house dress, worth $3 billion, flying commercial to understand her customers' experience. Building something, creating something, being someone who mattered beyond the numbers in her bank account. I thought about what she'd said. Your great-grandfather built wealth. What have you built? Nothing. I'd built absolutely nothing. I spent 3 days in that hotel room thinking. Really thinking, maybe for the first time in my life. I thought about the charities I supposedly supported, how I wrote checks and showed up for photo opportunities, but never actually engaged with the work. Never met the people being helped. Never understood what they needed beyond my money. I thought about my friends, wealthy, beautiful, empty people who talked about nothing and cared about less. People I'd never had a real conversation with because we were all too busy performing our roles. I thought about my family, my father who I saw quarterly for awkward dinners, my mother who'd remarried and moved to Monaco, my siblings who were carbon copies of me, trust fund babies playing at life without actually living it. I thought about the staff I employed, the housekeeper whose name I couldn't remember, the driver I'd never spoken to beyond giving directions, the assistant I treated like a voice-activated calendar rather than a human being. I'd spent 28 years sleepwalking through a privileged life, never questioning, never growing, never becoming anything beyond my bank account. On the 4th day, I flew back to New York. On the 5th day, I walked into my father's office unannounced. Victoria? He looked up from his desk, surprised. We didn't do spontaneous visits. Is something wrong? Yes, everything is wrong. I sat down across from him. Dad, what do you do all day? Excuse me. What do you actually do? You manage the trust fund, yes. But what else? What have you built? What have you created? What mark have you made on the world besides being born into money? He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Victoria, what brought this on? A woman on an airplane told me I'm worthless. And she was right. I told him about Eleanor Westbrook, about how I tried to remove her from first class, about everything she'd said to me, about the shame and realization and desperate need to be something more than just wealthy and pretty and useless. My father listened in silence. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair. Expensive, imported, probably cost more than that hotel room I'd stayed in, and sighed. I've thought the same things, he admitted quietly. About myself. About what I've done with my life. I inherited wealth and maintained it. That's all. My father built, my grandfather built, and I just held on. So what do we do? I asked. How do we become people who matter? I don't know, he said honestly. But I think you're brave for asking the question. I left his office without answers, but with something I hadn't had before, awareness. The first thing I did was learn my housekeeper's name. Maria. She'd worked for me for 3 years, and I'd never asked. She had 2 children and a sick mother she was supporting. She dreamed of going back to school to become a nurse. She was kind and hardworking, and I treated her like furniture. Maria, I said, sitting down at my kitchen table where I'd never sat before. I need to apologize to you. She looked shocked. Employers didn't sit at kitchen tables. Employers didn't apologize. For what, Ms. Ashford? For 3 years of treating you like you're invisible. For never learning your name or asking about your life. For being exactly the kind of entitled, clueless person I hate. I'm sorry. Maria sat down slowly, like she thought this might be a trap. Thank you. That means a lot. Tell me about your children. Tell me about your life. Tell me who you are beyond the person who cleans my apartment. We talked for 2 hours. I learned about her son who wanted to be a doctor, her daughter who was brilliant at math, her mother's cancer treatments, her dreams of nursing school, her life that was so full and rich and meaningful despite having a fraction of my resources. You're amazing, I said when she finished. You work so hard. You care so much. You're building something real, a family, a future, a life. I've done none of that. It's never too late to start, Maria said gently. That became my mantra. It's never too late to start. I started volunteering at a homeless shelter, not writing checks, actually showing up, serving food, talking to people, learning their stories. It was humbling and heartbreaking and eye-opening. I started learning names. The doorman in my building was Paolo. He had a master's degree in engineering but couldn't find work when he immigrated. My driver was James. He was putting 3 kids through college. The barista at my coffee shop was Mia. She was an artist struggling to make rent. People had names, lives, dreams, struggles, and I'd spent 28 years not seeing any of it. I called the charities I sat on the boards of and resigned from half of them. The ones where I contributed nothing but my name and my checkbook. The ones I kept, I engaged with. I visited programs. I met recipients. I asked questions. I learned what they actually needed instead of assuming my money was enough. I started reading, not fashion magazines and society columns, but books about poverty and inequality and social justice. About people who'd built things and changed things and mattered. I was a month into this new life when my father called. Victoria, your mother is having her annual gala in Monaco next month. She expects us to attend. I'm not going. You have to go? It's expected. I don't care what's expected. I'm not going to fly to Monaco to drink champagne and pretend I'm charitable. If Mother wants to see me, she can come here and volunteer at the shelter with me. Silence. Then, you're really serious about this. About changing. I'm serious about becoming someone worth knowing. Someone who builds instead of just takes. Someone who'd make great-grandfather proud instead of ashamed. He'd be proud of you now, my father said softly. I know I am. It was the first time he'd ever said that to me. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? Sometimes we need someone to hold up a mirror before we can see ourselves clearly. Share your story in the comments. 3 months after the flight, I was at the homeless shelter when a woman in her 50s approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. Victoria Ashford? She asked. Yes. I'm sorry, have we met? I'm Caroline Westbrook, Eleanor's daughter. My mother wanted me to stop by and see how you were doing. My stomach dropped. She's been checking on me? She checks on everyone who makes an impression on her. You made quite an impression. Caroline smiled. She told me about your conversation on the flight. About how you tried to remove her from first class. I'm so ashamed of that. I was terrible. You were honest. Honestly terrible, but honest. And Mother appreciates honesty. Caroline looked around the shelter, at me in jeans and a t-shirt instead of designer labels, at the work I was doing. She wanted to know if you changed. I can see you have. I'm trying. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do. Caroline handed me an envelope. Mother asked me to give you this. Inside was a handwritten letter. Victoria, I've been watching your progress these past 3 months. The volunteering, the engagement with your charities, the way you've started seeing people instead of status symbols. I'm impressed. Real change is hard. It requires humility, effort, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. You're doing all 3. Keep going. When you're ready, and only when you're ready, I'd like to talk to you about working at Westbrook Airlines. Not in some token position, but real work. Learning the business from the ground up. Starting at the bottom and earning your way up through competence and effort, not connections. You'll be paid what the position warrants, not what your name suggests you deserve. You'll work harder than you've ever worked. You'll fail sometimes, and you'll learn what it means to build something instead of just inherit it. If you're interested, email me. We'll talk. Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Eleanor Westbrook was giving me a chance. A real chance to become someone meaningful. Someone who built instead of just took. But only if I was willing to work for it. I looked at Caroline. Tell your mother yes. Tell her I'm ready. Are you sure? She's not kidding about starting at the bottom. You'll be making $40,000 a year. You'll be doing grunt work. You'll be treated like any other employee. Good. I want to earn it. I want to deserve it. I clutched the letter. For the first time in my life, I want to build something real. Caroline smiled. Then welcome to Westbrook Airlines. You start Monday. Monday came faster than I expected. I reported to Westbrook Airlines headquarters at 7 a.m., wearing practical clothes, slacks and a blouse, sensible shoes, my hair in a simple ponytail. No designer labels, no expensive jewelry. Just me, nervous and determined and ready to work. Eleanor met me in the lobby herself. Victoria, she said, shaking my hand. Welcome to Westbrook Airlines. Are you ready to learn what real work looks like? Yes, ma'am. Good. Follow me. She led me through the building, past executive offices with their mahogany furniture and expensive art, down to the operations floor where the real work happened. Customer service reps in headsets, baggage handlers coordinating shipments, maintenance crews reviewing aircraft reports. This was where the airline actually functioned. Not in the boardroom, but here, with people who worked 12-hour shifts and solved problems and kept planes in the air. You'll start in customer service, Eleanor said. 3 months. You'll handle complaints, rebookings, lost baggage claims. You'll learn what our customers actually experience, what they need, what we do well, and what we fail at. I've never done customer service. I know. That's why you're starting there. She handed me over to a manager, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, who eyed me skeptically. Another rich kid playing at work. Sandra asked Eleanor bluntly. Maybe. Or maybe someone who's genuinely trying to change. Time will tell. Sandra assigned me a cubicle, a headset, and a training manual the size of a dictionary. Read this by tomorrow. You start taking calls Wednesday. Don't mess up. Our customers are depending on you. The first week was brutal. I'd never worked a real job before. I'd never sat in a cubicle for 8 hours straight. I'd never dealt with angry customers who screamed at me about delayed flights and lost luggage. I'd never had to solve problems with limited resources and strict policies. I was terrible at it. Ms. Ashford, you can't just offer to upgrade everyone to first class when they complain, Sandra said on day 3, pulling me aside. We have policies, procedures. You can't throw money at every problem. But the customer was upset about missing their connection. So you follow the rebooking protocol. You don't create exceptions because you feel bad. This is a business, not a charity. She softened slightly. Look, I get that you're trying. But you need to learn that money doesn't solve everything. Sometimes people just need you to listen, to care, to find real solutions within the system. She was right. I'd spent my whole life thinking money was the answer to everything. It wasn't. By the end of week 2, I was exhausted. My feet hurt from the concrete floors. My voice was hoarse from talking all day. My brain hurt from learning systems and policies and codes. I went home every night to my penthouse and collapsed on my expensive couch, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. Maria found me crying one evening. Ms. Ashford, Victoria, what's wrong? I'm failing. I'm terrible at this job. I don't know how normal people do this every day. I wiped my eyes. How do you work 2 jobs and raise kids and take care of your mother? How does anyone survive this? You do it because you have to. Because your family depends on you. Because giving up isn't an option. She sat down beside me. But you don't have to. You could quit tomorrow and go back to your old life. Nobody would blame you. Except me. I'd blame me. I looked at her. I want to deserve this life, Maria. Not just inherit it. I want to earn the right to have what I have. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. She squeezed my hand. Keep going. It gets easier. She was right. Slowly, painfully, it did get easier. I learned the systems. I learned how to listen to customers, really listen, and find solutions that worked within the rules. I learned efficiency, problem solving, patience. I learned what it felt like to work hard and earn a paycheck and feel genuinely tired at the end of the day. My coworkers started warming to me when they realized I wasn't going to quit after a week like they'd expected. You're actually doing okay, Sandra admitted in week 6. Better than okay. You care. That matters. Thank you. That means a lot. Don't get cocky. You've still got 2 months in this department. After 3 months in customer service, Eleanor moved me to baggage operations. I spent 10-hour days in the cargo area, learning how luggage was handled, tracked, loaded. It was physical work, lifting, sorting, scanning. I developed muscles I didn't know I had. Ruined manicures that I didn't bother redoing. Wore my hair in a messy bun because that's what was practical. I became friends with the baggage handlers, Jose, Marcus, Tanya. People who worked harder than anyone I'd ever known and made a fraction of what I'd spent on a handbag. You're all right, Victoria, Jose said one day during our lunch break. For a rich girl. I'm trying not to be just a rich girl anymore. You're succeeding. He offered me half his sandwich. You hungry? My wife makes too much food. I took it, grateful, and we ate together on a concrete loading dock, and it was one of the best meals I'd ever had. 6 months into my work at Westbrook Airlines, Eleanor called me to her office. I'd only been up to the executive floor a few times, to turn in reports, to attend mandatory meetings. I'd never been to Eleanor's personal office. It was beautiful, but not ostentatious. Large windows overlooking the airfield, comfortable furniture, walls covered with photos. Not of her with celebrities or politicians, but of employees. Pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, customer service reps. The people who made her airline work. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair. Tell me what you've learned. That I was completely useless before, I said honestly. That real work is hard and exhausting and meaningful in ways I never understood. That the people who do this work every day are stronger than I'll ever be. What else? That money doesn't make you valuable. That contribution makes you valuable. That building something matters more than just owning things. I looked at her directly. You've built something incredible. An airline that treats employees well, that prioritizes safety and service, that actually cares. And I'd been so blind to it because you didn't look wealthy enough for me to respect you. And now I understand that wealth that needs to announce itself isn't real wealth. That the most valuable people are often the ones doing invisible work. That I had everything backwards. Eleanor smiled. You're ready for the next phase. Which is management training. You'll rotate through departments, operations, marketing, finance, HR. You'll learn how this company works from every angle. It'll take 2 years. And at the end, if you've proven yourself, I'll offer you a real position. Not because of your name or your family's money. Because you've earned it. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for taking it. Most people in your position would have quit after week 1. You stayed. You worked. You changed. That takes courage. Over the next 2 years, I learned the airline business inside and out. I worked with every department, learned every system, understood every challenge. I worked 60-hour weeks, took night classes in business management, read everything I could about aviation and customer service and operations. I failed sometimes, made mistakes, got things wrong. But I learned from every failure, got back up, kept trying. My old friends stopped calling. I didn't have time for their parties and galas, and I didn't want to. My father watched my transformation with pride mixed with confusion. My mother called from Monaco to tell me I was embarrassing the family by playing at being working class. I'm not playing, I told her. I'm living. Finally, Maria finished her nursing degree. I'd helped her enroll, paying her tuition as a gift, not charity. You believed in me, she said, when nobody else did. Now let me believe in you back. I promoted my driver James to head of my transportation investments. He knew more about the industry than I ever would. I hired Paolo the doorman as a consultant for a construction project. His engineering degree was finally being used. I learned that investing in people meant more than just giving them money. It meant seeing their potential, giving them opportunities, believing in what they could become. Just like Eleanor had done for me. 2 years and 3 months after that fateful flight, Eleanor called me to her office again. "Victoria, I'm retiring," she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. What? What? Because I'm 80 years old and I've been running this airline for 45 years. It's time. She smiled. But I need to know it's in good hands. Hands that understand what we've built here. Hands that care about people, not just profits. You have excellent executives. I do. But they need a leader who remembers what it's like to be a customer service rep in a cubicle. Who knows what baggage handlers deal with every day. Who understands that wealth without character is worthless. She leaned forward. I want you to be my VP of operations. Not now, you're not ready yet. But in 5 years, with the right development and mentorship, you could be. Eleanor, I don't know if I'm capable. 2 years ago, you weren't. You were a spoiled, entitled child playing at life. But you've worked harder than anyone I've ever seen to become someone different. Someone better. Someone worthy of responsibility. She handed me a folder. This is your development plan. 5 years of intensive training, mentorship, education. It won't be easy. You'll want to quit. But if you stick with it, you'll be ready. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The plan was comprehensive, demanding, rigorous. Everything I'd need to learn to run operations for a major airline. Why me? I asked. You could choose from hundreds of qualified people. Because you understand what I understand. That a company is only as good as the people who make it work. That treating employees with dignity matters. That wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. Eleanor's eyes were warm. You remind me of myself at your age. Hungry to prove yourself. Desperate to build something meaningful. I want to give you the chance someone once gave me. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Because you've already proven you're willing to fail, to struggle, to work for what you want. That's what leaders do. 5 years later, I stood at the window of my office, not as grand as Eleanor's had been, but with the same view of the airfield, and watched planes take off and land. Our planes. Our airline. I was VP of operations for Westbrook Airlines. I'd earned it through 5 years of brutal work, constant learning, and genuine care for the people who made this company function. Eleanor had retired fully now, though she still flew commercial regularly to check on things. She'd become a mentor, a friend, a second mother. She attended my wedding to Marcus. Yes, Marcus from baggage operations, who'd seen past my wealthy background to who I actually was underneath. You married a baggage handler? My mother had said with horror when I told her. I married a man who works hard, treats people with dignity, and loves me for who I am, not what I have. I corrected. The best decision I ever made. My father had walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Your great-grandfather would be proud, he'd whispered. You built something. You became someone. Maria was there too, my friend now, not my housekeeper. She'd become a nurse, and her son was in medical school, funded by a scholarship I'd established for children of service workers. I'd used my inheritance to create opportunities for others, scholarships, small business loans, affordable housing projects. Not to absolve my guilt, but to build something meaningful with resources I'd done nothing to earn. The airline was thriving. We'd expanded routes, improved service, increased employee benefits. We were profitable because we treated people well, both customers and employees, and that created loyalty and excellence. I still thought about that flight sometimes. About sitting in seat 1B, trying to remove a shabby, elderly woman from first class because she didn't meet my standards of wealth. That woman had owned the entire airplane I was standing in. And she'd given me the greatest gift anyone could give, a mirror to see myself clearly and a chance to become someone better. My phone rang. Eleanor, how's my protege doing? She asked. Your former protege is drowning in operational reports and loving every minute of it. Good. That means you're engaged. Listen, I'm flying out tomorrow, commercial, to check on our Denver hub. Want to join me? In first class or coach? I asked, smiling. Coach, obviously. First-class passengers are too isolated. You learn more from the people in the back of the plane. I'll be there. Eleanor. Yes. Thank you. For seeing who I could become when I couldn't see it myself. You did the work, Victoria. I just pointed you in the right direction. The courage to change was all yours. After we hung up, I turned back to the window. A plane was taking off, one of ours, carrying hundreds of people to their destinations. Each person with their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. I would never again look at someone and judge their worth by their appearance. Never again assume that wealth equated to value or poverty meant insignificance. Because I'd learned the hard way that the most valuable people are often invisible. That true wealth is measured in character and contribution, not currency. That building something matters more than inheriting everything. I'd kicked an old woman out of first class because she wore a house dress. That old woman had owned the plane. And instead of destroying me for my cruelty, she'd given me a chance to become someone worth knowing. Sometimes the people we dismiss hold the keys to our transformation. Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to our greatest growth. What judgment have you made that you learned from? Share in the comments. Your story might help someone else see more clearly. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. Working late, but I'll be home for dinner. Love you. His response came immediately. I'm making that pasta you love. And Victoria, I'm proud of you. Every day, I'm proud of who you are. Who I am. Not what I have. Not where I came from. But who I'd worked to become. A woman who built instead of just inherited. A woman who saw people instead of status symbols. A woman who'd learned that the real first-class experience isn't about leather seats and free champagne. It's about treating everyone with dignity, regardless of how they look or what they can afford. I'd spent 28 years being Victoria Ashford III, trust fund baby, entitled and empty. I'd spent the last 7 years becoming Victoria Castellano, VP of Operations, someone who earned her place in the world. The difference wasn't in my bank account. That was still healthy, still substantial. The difference was in my heart. I'd learned to see, really see. And once you learn to see people clearly, beyond their clothes, beyond their apparent wealth or poverty, beyond all the superficial markers we use to sort and judge, you can never go back to being blind. Eleanor Westbrook, in her $15 house dress, had taught me that. And I would spend the rest of my life proving I'd learned the lesson. 10 years after that fateful flight, I boarded a Westbrook Airlines plane for a business trip to Los Angeles. I was traveling first class because I could afford it and my knees appreciated the space, wearing comfortable, practical clothes because I'd learned that comfort mattered more than appearance. As I settled into seat 1A, a young woman in designer labels boarded the plane. She couldn't have been more than 25, dripping in wealth, carrying herself with the entitled confidence I recognized from my former self. She stopped at seat 1B and stared at me with obvious disdain. I knew that look. I'd worn that look once. "Excuse me," she said in a voice that expected immediate compliance. "I think you're in the wrong section." I smiled peacefully, pulled out my boarding pass, and handed it to her. She studied it, confused and irritated. "How did you afford first class?" The same question I'd asked Eleanor a decade ago. "I manage," I said simply, echoing Eleanor's words. "And you must be in 1B. Welcome aboard." She sat down with obvious displeasure, radiating judgment and disapproval. I opened my book, an actual paper book, worn and comfortable, and began to read. "You don't seem like a typical first-class passenger," she said after a moment. "And what does a typical first-class passenger seem like?" I asked, looking at her with kind but piercing eyes. "Well, they dress appropriately. They have the right luggage. They belong here." She gestured at herself. "They look like me." "I see," I said. "How sad for you." "Excuse me. To think that clothes and luggage determine who belongs somewhere. To believe that wealth is visible and poverty is obvious. To be so young and already so blind." I returned to my book. "Yes, very sad." Her face flushed with anger and embarrassment, just as mine had, 10 years ago. The plane pushed back from the gate, and I waited. Waited for her to make the choice I'd made. To lash out, to complain, to double down on her judgment. Or to pause. To reflect. To wonder if maybe, just maybe, she'd gotten something wrong. "Who are you?" she asked finally, her voice smaller now. Someone who learned a hard lesson about judging people based on appearance. Someone who's still learning, every day, how to see people clearly. I closed my book and turned to face her fully. Someone who used to be exactly like you. What changed? A woman in a house dress taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with how you look and everything to do with who you are. That building something matters more than owning everything. That the people we dismiss might be the ones with the most to teach us. The young woman was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm Sophia. Sophia Vanderberg. Victoria Castellano. Nice to meet you, Sophia. Are you really successful? Even dressed like that. I'm VP of Operations for this airline. And yes, I'm successful. But not because of my clothes, or my title, or my bank account. Because I learned to value people over appearances, contribution over status, character over currency. Sophia absorbed this, her expensive facade cracking slightly. My grandmother tried to tell me something similar. I didn't listen. It's never too late to start listening. How do I start? I pulled a business card from my bag. Simple, elegant, just my name and email. Learn names. See people instead of status symbols. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. And if you're serious about growing, email me in 6 months. Tell me what you've learned about really seeing people. If I'm impressed, maybe we'll talk about what real success looks like. I handed her the card, and she took it with trembling hands. Why would you help me? After I judged you. Because someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. Someone saw potential in a spoiled, entitled child and gave her a chance to become better. I'm just paying it forward. The plane took off, carrying us both toward Los Angeles and whatever came next. Sophia sat quietly beside me, sometimes reading, sometimes thinking, sometimes glancing at the business card like it was a lifeline. Just like I'd done 10 years ago with Eleanor's card. The cycle continued. The lesson passed forward. The transformation possible for anyone brave enough to see themselves clearly and humble enough to change. I'd kicked an old woman out of first class. That old woman had owned the plane, and she'd taught me that real wealth, real success, real value has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with character. Now it was my turn to teach someone else. And so the lesson continued, one humbled soul at a time. True wealth isn't visible. True success isn't obvious. And the people who matter most are often the ones we overlook. The question is, will you learn this lesson through kindness or through humiliation? The choice is always yours. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button right now, subscribe to channel, and smash that bell icon for more content like this. See you next time. Bye.